The maintenance hangar at Halaman Air Force Base hummed with the steady drone of fluorescent lights and the distant whine of jet engines. Staff Sergeant Kiera, Phantom, Voss crouched beneath the belly of a MQ-9 Reaper training drone, her weathered hands working methodically to replace corroded titanium bolts. Oil stained her flight suit, and her auburn hair was pulled back in regulation. At 28, she carried herself with the quiet competence of someone who had seen combat but never spoke of it. The other mechanics barely acknowledged her presence. To them, she was just another grease monkey transferred from some classified program they didn't care to understand. They didn't know about the silver star gathering dust in her quarters, or why her call sign made veteran pilots stop mid-conversation when they heard it whispered in ready rooms. Voss. The voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade. She looked up to see Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez approaching, his expression unreadable. Behind him walked a man in civilian clothes, khakis, and a polo shirt that couldn't hide his military bearing. The stranger was perhaps 60, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. "Yes, Chief," Kiera straightened, wiping her hands on a rag. "This is Colonel Harrison, retired. He's here for the contractor evaluation." Rodriguez's tone suggested this was routine, but something in his posture said otherwise. The retired colonel stepped forward, and Kiera noticed the subtle limp in his left leg, the way his right hand trembled almost imperceptibly. Combat injuries, she recognized. When their eyes met, she saw something flicker across his features, recognition, perhaps, or surprise. Then, without warning, Colonel Harrison snapped to attention and rendered a crisp salute. The hangar seemed to hold its breath. Conversation stopped. Tools ceased their rhythmic tapping. Every eye turned toward the unlikely tableau, a distinguished retired officer saluting a maintenance sergeant barely out of her 20s. Kiera's training took over. She returned the salute with practiced precision, but confusion clouded her green eyes. "Sir." "It's an honor, Phantom," Harrison said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made the words feel like a medal presentation. "I've been looking forward to meeting you for quite some time." The mechanics exchanged glances. Chief Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably. Someone dropped a wrench, the metallic clang echoing off the concrete walls. "I'm sorry, sir, but I think there's been some mistake," Kiera began, but Harrison was already shaking his head. "No mistake, Sergeant. I know exactly who you are." His smile was sad, proud, and tinged with something that looked remarkably like regret. "The question is, do you know why I'm really here?" The silence stretched taut as piano wire. In the distance, an F-16 screamed down the runway, its afterburners painting the desert sky with fire. But inside the hangar, time seemed suspended, waiting for an answer that would change everything Kiera thought she knew about her carefully ordered world. Chief Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Colonel, perhaps we should." "Tell me, Phantom," Harrison interrupted, never breaking eye contact with Kiera. "What do you remember about Operation Shadowfall?" The wrench in Kiera's hand clattered to the floor. The morning briefing at Halaman typically drew maybe a dozen personnel, enough to fill the first 2 rows of folding chairs in Conference Room B today. The room was packed. Officers Kiera had never seen before occupied every seat, their dress blues bearing ribbons that told stories of deployments to places that didn't exist on public maps. The air conditioning struggled against body heat and nervous energy. Kiera sat in the back row, still in her maintenance coveralls, feeling profoundly out of place. Chief Rodriguez had ordered her to attend without explanation, and the knot in her stomach had been tightening ever since Harrison's cryptic question in the hangar. Shadowfall. She knew that name, knew it the way burn victims knew fire, with a mixture of terror and unwilling intimacy. Colonel Harrison stood at the front of the room, no longer the casual visitor in civilian clothes. His Air Force uniform was immaculate, heavy with decorations. The silver eagles on his shoulders caught the fluorescent light as he moved. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison began, his voice carrying easily to the back of the room. "What I'm about to tell you is classified above your current clearance levels. Compartmentalized. Need to know. But recent developments have made disclosure necessary." A PowerPoint slide flickered to life on the wall-mounted screen. A satellite image of mountainous terrain, coordinates blacked out, timestamp showing a date from 3 years ago. Kiera's hands clenched involuntarily in her lap. Operation Shadowfall was a joint strike mission conducted by the 432nd Wing out of Creech Air Force Base. Harrison continued. The target was a high-value individual responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces. The mission parameters were simple: penetrate heavily defended airspace, neutralize the target, and extract without detection. Another slide: aircraft specifications. The sleek, angular lines of an experimental stealth fighter that had never appeared in any public documentation. Kiera recognized every curve, every sensor array, every weapon hardpoint. She had flown that aircraft for 18 months, had pushed it to its absolute limits in training scenarios that prepared her for missions that officially never happened. "The pilot selected for this mission was considered one of our most capable assets," Harrison said, and his eyes found Kiera across the crowded room. "Someone with an exceptional ability to improvise under pressure, to think 3 moves ahead of the enemy, to survive when survival seemed impossible." Major Hawthorne, the squadron commander, shifted in his front-row seat. "With respect, Colonel, what does this have to do with current operations?" Harrison's smile was thin. "Because, Major, the pilot of that mission is sitting in this room right now." Every head turned. Eyes swept the assembled officers, looking for someone they didn't recognize, someone who belonged in this story. The scrutiny passed over Kiera like a searchlight, never quite focusing. "The mission designation was Sierra 7 Alpha," Harrison continued. "Call sign Phantom. The pilot successfully penetrated enemy airspace, eliminated the primary target, and," he paused, consulting his notes, "and discovered something that changed the entire trajectory of our counterterrorism efforts." Kiera felt the blood drain from her face. Phantom. Her call sign, but how could they know? How could anyone know? The debriefings after Shadowfall had been conducted by people without names, in rooms without windows. She had been sworn to secrecy under threat of treason charges. "The intelligence gathered during that mission," Harrison said, "led directly to the disruption of 17 terrorist cells across 3 continents. It prevented attacks that would have killed thousands of civilians. It was, by any metric, one of the most successful covert operations in recent military history." The room was silent now, the kind of complete quiet that only came when everyone present understood they were hearing something important, something that would change how they thought about their jobs and their lives. Harrison clicked to the next slide, a grainy photograph of an aircraft taking off in pre-dawn darkness. "The pilot of that mission has been living under deep cover for the past 3 years, protecting both the operational security of ongoing missions and their own safety from enemy retaliation." His gaze settled on Kiera again, and this time she couldn't look away. "That cover is now blown." The secure conference room at Halaman had been cleared except for 5 people: Colonel Harrison, Chief Rodriguez, Major Hawthorne, a stern-faced woman in civilian clothes who had introduced herself only as Agent Carter, and Kiera. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the polished table. "You've been compromised," Agent Carter said without preamble, sliding a manila folder across the table toward Kiera. "Intelligence intercepts from the past 72 hours indicate that hostile actors have identified you as the Shadowfall pilot." Kiera opened the folder with trembling fingers. The contents made her stomach drop: surveillance photos of her apartment, her daily routes to work, detailed schedules of her maintenance duties. Someone had been watching her for weeks, maybe months. "How?" she whispered. "Facial recognition software," Harrison answered. The technology has improved dramatically since your last mission. They matched you to satellite footage from the extraction zone. Major Hawthorne leaned forward, his confusion evident. I'm sorry, but this is still not making sense. Voss is a maintenance technician. She's never been rated for combat aircraft. Agent Carter's smile was sharp as a knife blade. Sergeant Voss has been rated on aircraft that don't officially exist, Major. Her training records are so classified that your security clearance wouldn't let you see her cafeteria receipts from that period. The cover story was necessary, Harrison explained. After Shadowfall, we needed Phantom to disappear completely. A maintenance position at a training base seemed like the perfect hiding place. She could stay current on aircraft systems while appearing to be just another wrench turner. Kiera found her voice. Sir, my orders were to maintain cover indefinitely. Has something changed? Everything has changed, Carter replied. The high-value target you eliminated in Shadowfall had a brother. He spent the last 3 years building a network specifically designed to hunt down American Special Operations personnel. He calls it the Retribution Protocol. She slid another photograph across the table. A bearded man in his 40s, eyes that seemed to burn with calculated hatred. Malik Hassan al-Rashid, MIT engineering degree, former Syrian military intelligence, current leader of what we're calling the Ghost Network. He's been systematically targeting anyone involved in operations that damaged his organization. How many others? Kiera asked. 14 operators, Harrison said quietly. All killed in what appeared to be accidents or random crimes. Car crashes, muggings gone wrong, house fires. Very professional work. The room fell silent. Outside, the sound of aircraft operations continued, but it seemed distant now, muffled by the weight of revelation. What's the plan? Kiera asked, though part of her already knew the answer. We're pulling you out, Carter said. New identity, new location, witness protection protocols. No. The word came out harder than Kiera had intended. Every eye in the room focused on her. I'm sorry, Carter's voice carried a note of surprise. I said no. Kiera closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. I won't run again. Harrison frowned. Phantom, this isn't a matter of pride. These people are professionals. They've already demonstrated their capability. And so have I. Kiera stood, her chair scraping against the floor. You want to know what I remember about Shadowfall? I remember flying alone into airspace that was supposed to be impossible to penetrate. I remember completing a mission that everyone said couldn't be done. And I remember that when it was over, instead of medals or recognition, I got a new name and orders to hide. The secrecy was for your protection, Agent Carter protested. The secrecy was for your convenience, Kiera shot back. Easier to bury an operation if the pilot doesn't officially exist. Major Hawthorne looked from Kiera to Harrison. What are you proposing, Sergeant? Kiera straightened, and for the first time since entering the room, she looked like the combat pilot she had always been. I'm proposing we stop running and start hunting. The tactical planning room buzzed with activity that would have been impossible to imagine 24 hours earlier. Maps covered every available surface, marked with red pins indicating confirmed Ghost Network activities and yellow pins showing suspected locations. Communications equipment that didn't appear in any inventory-filled folding tables. Personnel moved with the focused urgency of a unit preparing for immediate deployment. Kiera studied a satellite image of a compound in rural Montenegro, her trained eye picking out defensive positions and escape routes. 3 days of intensive briefings had brought her up to speed on current intelligence regarding Malik Hassan al-Rashid's organization. The Ghost Network was more sophisticated than anyone had initially realized, a hybrid of traditional terrorism and corporate methodology that made them exceptionally dangerous. The compound is designated Objective Raven, Lieutenant Colonel Brooks explained, pointing to key features on the aerial photograph. Intelligence indicates al-Rashid has been using it as a training facility for his assassination teams. More importantly, we believe he's there now, planning the next phase of the Retribution Protocol. Agent Carter materialized beside them, a cup of coffee in one hand and an encrypted tablet in the other. NSA confirms increased communication traffic from that location over the past week. Someone is coordinating something big. How big? Kiera asked. 27 targets, Carter replied grimly. All military personnel involved in operations against al-Rashid's organization over the past 5 years. If he succeeds, it would be the largest coordinated attack against American Special Operations personnel in history. Harrison joined the group, his face grave. The Joint Chiefs have authorized a preemptive strike. We're calling it Operation Reckoning. Who's flying it? Kiera asked, though something in Harrison's expression already told her the answer. You are. The room seemed to hold its breath. Kiera felt 20 pairs of eyes watching her reaction, waiting to see if the maintenance sergeant they had known for months would transform back into the combat pilot she had always been. What aircraft? She asked. Brooks smiled for the first time in days. Something special, follow me. They walked through a maze of corridors that Kiera had never seen, past security checkpoints that required biometric scans and code words she didn't recognize. The underground hangar they eventually reached could have housed a commercial airliner, but it contained only one aircraft. Dear God, Kiera whispered. The stealth fighter before her was unlike anything she had ever seen. Its design incorporated lessons learned from every classified program of the past decade, wrapped in radar-absorbent materials that made it appear to shimmer in the artificial light. The aircraft was smaller than the one she had flown on Shadowfall, more organic in its curves, as if it had been grown rather than built. YF-25 Wraith, Harrison said proudly. Prototype number 3. Maximum speed classified above Mach 2, operational ceiling above 60,000 feet, stealth characteristics that make it effectively invisible to current generation radar systems. How invisible? Kiera asked, walking slowly around the aircraft. The radar cross-section is smaller than a sparrow, Brooks replied. At operational altitude, enemy systems would have better luck tracking an actual bird. Kiera ran her hand along the wing's leading edge, feeling the subtle texture of the stealth coating. Weapons systems. Internal bay carries 8 AIM-120D missiles or equivalent ordnance, Carter answered. 20mm cannon with 300 rounds. But this isn't a bomber mission, Phantom. This is surgical precision. What's the target? Harrison's expression darkened. Al-Rashid himself. Intelligence indicates he'll be in the compound for exactly 48 hours, coordinating final preparations for the Retribution Protocol. Our window is small, and it won't come again. Kiera continued her inspection of the aircraft, noting details that only a pilot would appreciate. The carefully positioned air intakes, the seamless integration of sensors, the subtle aerodynamic refinements that spoke of countless hours in wind tunnels and computer simulations. When do we launch? She asked. 36 hours, Harrison replied. Just enough time for a compressed training program to familiarize you with the Wraith systems. Kiera nodded, already mentally preparing for the transition from maintenance duties to combat operations. I'll need a full technical manual, flight characteristics data, and at least 6 hours in the simulator. Already arranged, Brooks said, but first there's something else you need to see. The flight simulator occupied its own climate-controlled room, a perfect replica of the YF-25's cockpit mounted on hydraulic actuators that could reproduce the sensation of flight with stunning accuracy. Kiera settled into the pilot's seat, her hands automatically finding familiar controls, while her eyes cataloged the differences from previous aircraft. The heads-up display uses a hybrid augmented reality system, the technician explained, helping her adjust the helmet's fit. Threat assessment, navigation data, and targeting information are overlaid directly onto your field of vision. It's like having a perfect tactical awareness at all times. Kiera activated the startup sequence, watching as systems came online with satisfying precision. The Wraith's avionics were generations ahead of anything she had previously flown, incorporating artificial intelligence algorithms that could analyze battlefield conditions faster than human reflexes. "Let's run the Montenegro approach," she said. The simulator's visual system activated, plunging her into a virtual world of mountainous terrain and simulated air defenses. She pushed the throttles forward, feeling the aircraft respond with eager acceleration. The flight characteristics were extraordinary, responsive enough for aerobatic maneuvers, stable enough for precision bombing, efficient enough for extended-range missions. "Threat detection," the technician announced. SA-15 surface-to-air missile system, bearing 085 degrees. The heads-up display immediately highlighted the threat, calculating optimal evasion routes and countermeasure deployment timing. Kiera banked left, diving toward a mountain valley that would mask her approach. "Impressive," she murmured, watching the terrain flow past at simulated high speed. "The AI can actually fly the aircraft autonomously if necessary," the technician explained. "But we're told you prefer manual control." "Always," Kiera confirmed, pulling into a climbing turn that brought the target compound into view. The simulation ran for 3 hours, covering every conceivable scenario from normal approach to emergency extraction. By the end, Kiera felt comfortable with the Wraith's capabilities, though she knew that simulator time was no substitute for actual flight experience. "How do you feel about the mission?" the technician asked as they shut down the systems. Kiera considered the question carefully. "It's dangerous. The compound is heavily defended, the target window is narrow, and will be operating without backup in hostile territory." She paused, removing her helmet. "But it's doable." "And Al-Rashid?" "He's been hunting my people for 3 years," Kiera replied, her voice carrying a hard edge. "It's time someone hunted him back." As she climbed out of the simulator, she noticed Harrison watching from the observation booth. Their eyes met through the thick glass, and she saw something in his expression that she hadn't expected. Pride, mixed with concern for a pilot about to undertake a mission that officially didn't exist. Just like Shadowfall. Just like always. But this time, Kiera thought, the ending would be different. This time, she was flying not just for mission success, but for every operator who had died because Al-Rashid wanted revenge. This time, it was personal. And that, she reflected as she walked toward her final briefing, might make all the difference. The pre-dawn darkness at Halaman felt different now, charged with purpose rather than routine. Kiera walked across the tarmac toward the YF-25, her flight suit crisp and her helmet bag slung over her shoulder. The desert air was cold, carrying the scent of aviation fuel and the distant promise of sunrise. Chief Rodriguez had assembled a skeleton crew for the launch, all personnel with security clearances high enough to pretend they had never seen this aircraft. They moved with professional efficiency, conducting final systems checks and weapons verification with the quiet intensity of people who understood the stakes. "Fuel load?" Kiera asked the crew chief. "Topped off. You've got enough for 8 hours flight time at cruise altitude, assuming normal consumption rates." "Weather?" "Clear skies all the way to target. Winds aloft minimal. You couldn't ask for better conditions." Kiera nodded, running through her mental checklist. She had spent the previous 18 hours memorizing every detail of the mission profile, from takeoff procedures to emergency extraction protocols. The intelligence package was comprehensive: guard rotations at the compound, communication schedules, even the layout of Al-Rashid's personal quarters. Harrison approached as she completed her external pre-flight inspection, "Final intelligence update," he said, handing her a sealed envelope. "Al-Rashid is confirmed on site. The window opens in 6 hours. Any changes to the tactical plan?" "None. You go in alone, eliminate the target, and extract. Simple and clean." Kiera almost smiled. "Nothing about this mission is simple, Colonel." "No," Harrison agreed, "but you've done more difficult things with less preparation." She thought of Shadowfall, of flying into defended airspace with outdated intelligence and equipment that was still experimental. This mission, by comparison, felt almost routine. If anything involving a stealth fighter and a high-value assassination could be called routine. "Phantom," Harrison said quietly, using her call sign for the first time since her cover had been blown. "Bring yourself home safe." "Roger that, sir." The climb to operational altitude took 23 minutes, the Wraith ascending through layers of atmosphere with mechanical precision. At 55,000 feet, Kiera leveled off and engaged the autopilot for the long cruise phase over international waters. The aircraft's stealth systems operated automatically, adjusting radar-absorbent surfaces and managing heat signatures to maintain invisibility. Below, the Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly in all directions, its surface broken only by the occasional wake of commercial shipping. At this altitude, the curvature of the Earth was visible, a subtle reminder of the vast scale of the world and the small part of it that would determine the success or failure of her mission. "Control, Phantom," she transmitted on the encrypted frequency. "Package delivered to cruise altitude, all systems nominal." "Roger, Phantom. You are cleared for autonomous operations. Check in at Waypoint Alpha." Waypoint Alpha was 600 miles ahead, marking the transition from overwater flight to penetration of European airspace. From there, she would navigate through a carefully planned route that avoided commercial air corridors and military exercise areas, threading between radar installations like a ghost. Kiera settled into the rhythm of long-distance flight, monitoring systems and weather conditions while her mind focused on the tactical challenges ahead. The compound in Montenegro was surrounded by mountainous terrain that would provide natural concealment but also limit escape routes. Al-Rashid's security team was professionally trained and heavily armed. One mistake would be fatal. But mistakes, she reflected, were for pilots who didn't prepare adequately, and preparation was something she had learned to do very, very well. The European coast appeared on her navigation display as a thin line of green, marking the transition from ocean to hostile territory. From this point forward, every mile would be contested, every minute a test of the Wraith's stealth capabilities against increasingly sophisticated detection systems. "Waypoint Alpha achieved," she reported, "beginning penetration phase." "Copy, Phantom. From this point forward, you are weapons-free and cleared for all mission objectives." The words carried weight beyond their technical meaning. She was now authorized to kill Al-Rashid and anyone who stood in her way. After 3 years of hiding, 3 years of pretending to be someone else, she was finally free to complete what Shadowfall had started. The Balkans unfolded beneath her like a tactical map come to life, mountain ranges and river valleys that had witnessed centuries of conflict. Soon, they would witness one more. The Montenegro compound appeared on Kiera's targeting display exactly where intelligence had promised it would be. A cluster of buildings nestled in a valley between 2 mountain ridges, accessible only by a narrow road that serpentined through terrain that would challenge even a determined hiker. From her altitude of 40,000 feet, it looked deceptively peaceful, like a rural retreat or hunting lodge. The illusion dissolved when she switched to thermal imaging. The heat signatures told a different story. Guards patrolling in organized patterns, vehicles positioned for rapid response, communication antennas that had no business existing at a remote mountain facility. This was a fortress designed to look like anything but. "Control, Phantom. I have visual on Objective Raven. Beginning target analysis. Copy Phantom. You are cleared to engage when ready. Kiera banked into a slow orbit, using the Wraith sensors to build a comprehensive picture of the compound's defenses. 6 guards visible on the perimeter, 2 more stationed at the main building. 3 vehicles, probably armored. No obvious surface-to-air missile systems, but the buildings could be concealing portable units. Most importantly, the thermal signature in the central building matched the pattern intelligence had associated with al-Rashid's presence. A cluster of heat sources in what appeared to be a conference room, suggesting an active meeting. She armed the aircraft's precision-guided munitions, watching as the weapons bay opened silently in the thin air. The missile's targeting system acquired the building, calculating impact angle and blast radius with algorithmic precision. A clean strike would eliminate the target while minimizing collateral damage to the surrounding area. Target acquired, she reported, preparing for final attack run. The Wraith descended like a falling star, its stealth coating rendering it invisible to any conventional detection system. At 20,000 feet, Kiera refined her aim, ensuring the missile would strike the exact center of the target building. At 15,000 feet, she began her final approach, the compound growing larger in her field of vision with each passing second. Weapon away. The missile dropped from the internal bay with barely perceptible vibration, its guidance system immediately acquiring the laser designation painted on the target building. Kiera pulled into a climbing turn, gaining altitude and distance from the impact zone while maintaining visual contact with the weapon's trajectory. The explosion was surgically precise, a brief flash of white light followed by the collapse of the building's central structure. Secondary explosions suggested the destruction of ammunition or fuel storage, but the damage remained contained to the primary target. Control Phantom, target destroyed, damage assessment in progress. Through the thermal imaging system, she watched the compound's response to the attack. Guards scattered from their positions, vehicles raced toward the burning building, and someone was clearly attempting to coordinate a response via radio communications that the Wraith's electronic warfare systems were systematically jamming. But there was no sign of al-Rashid. Control, I'm not seeing confirmation of target elimination. The heat signature that matched our intelligence is no longer visible, but I can't confirm whether that's due to successful engagement or target displacement. A pause, then, Phantom, you are cleared to remain on station for battle damage assessment. Maintain standoff distance. Kiera orbited the compound for another 20 minutes, watching rescue efforts and analyzing the destruction. The building was completely destroyed, the meeting room reduced to rubble. If al-Rashid had been inside, he was certainly dead. But the nagging doubt remained. Intelligence was rarely perfect, and professional terrorists were notorious for using body doubles and decoy facilities. Control Phantom. Objective appears successful, but I recommend follow-up intelligence gathering to confirm target elimination. Understood, you are cleared to return to base. Well done, Phantom. The flight home was uneventful, 8 hours of steady progress over darkening ocean waters. But as Kiera approached the American coast, she couldn't shake the feeling that something about the mission had been too easy. Al-Rashid had survived years of manhunts by never making things simple for his enemies. She hoped this time would be different. She very much hoped she was wrong. The debriefing room at Halaman was crowded with people who hadn't been there for the mission briefing, generals with stars on their shoulders, civilians in expensive suits, and at least 3 individuals who looked like they'd stepped out of a spy thriller. The successful completion of Operation Reckoning had clearly attracted attention from the highest levels of the military and intelligence communities. The strike was textbook perfect, Colonel Harrison was saying, gesturing toward a large monitor displaying satellite imagery of the destroyed compound. Precision munitions delivered exactly on target, minimal collateral damage, complete destruction of the primary objective. General Morrison, a three-star with gray hair and intelligent eyes, leaned forward in his chair. And the target? Thermal analysis suggests that Malik Hassan al-Rashid was in the building when it was destroyed, Agent Carter replied. However, we don't yet have physical confirmation of his death. How long until we know for certain? Asked one of the civilians, a man whose accent suggested East Coast education and Washington connections. Ground teams are en route to the site, Harrison answered. But given the remote location and the need for operational security, it could be 48 to 72 hours before we have definitive DNA confirmation. Kiera sat at the back of the room, still wearing her flight suit, feeling strangely disconnected from the discussion of her own mission. The adrenaline of combat had faded during the long flight home, leaving behind the familiar emptiness that followed high-stakes operations. Success or failure, the aftermath was always the same. Reports, analysis, and the gradual transition back to whatever passed for normal life. Sergeant Voss, General Morrison said, and suddenly every eye in the room was focused on her. Excellent work out there. The Joint Chiefs will want to hear about this personally. Thank you, sir. Walk me through the final attack run, he continued. Everything from target acquisition to weapon release. Kiera stood and moved to the front of the room, using a laser pointer to highlight key features on the satellite imagery. She described the approach, the targeting process, and the weapon's impact with the clinical precision that military debriefings demanded. But even as she spoke, part of her mind was analyzing inconsistencies in the intelligence picture. You mentioned concerns about target confirmation, General Morrison noted. Elaborate on that. The thermal signature that intelligence associated with al-Rashid's presence disappeared at the moment of impact, Kiera explained. That's consistent with successful target elimination, but it could also indicate that he wasn't in the building when the missile struck. Are you suggesting he escaped? I'm suggesting that we should be prepared for that possibility until we have physical confirmation. The room fell silent. Finally, Agent Carter spoke. What makes you think he might have survived? Kiera chose her words carefully. Al-Rashid has evaded capture for years by never following predictable patterns. The fact that he was exactly where intelligence said he would be, at exactly the time we expected, doing exactly what we thought he was doing, she shrugged. It feels convenient. One of the civilians frowned. Are you questioning the quality of our intelligence gathering? I'm questioning whether a man who has survived this long by being unpredictable would suddenly become predictable, Kiera replied, especially when he knows we're hunting him. General Morrison nodded thoughtfully. What would you recommend? Maintain operational security until we have confirmation. Don't assume the threat is neutralized just because we destroyed a building. Noted, the general said. Agent Carter, expedite the ground assessment. I want confirmation within 24 hours. As the meeting broke up, Harrison approached Kiera. Good instincts, he said quietly. Let's hope you're wrong, but it's better to be paranoid and alive than optimistic and dead. Yes, sir. There's something else, Harrison continued, lowering his voice further. Win or lose, this mission has put you back on the radar of some very important people. There's talk of reassignment, promotion, maybe even your own squadron. Kiera felt a familiar tightness in her chest. Sir, with respect, I didn't do this for career advancement. I know, but the war on terror has evolved, and we need pilots who can think like you do, strategically, tactically, and most importantly, skeptically. The days of simply following orders without questioning intelligence are over. Before Kiera could respond, Agent Carter approached with a secure satellite phone. Priority communication for Phantom, she announced. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, but the authority was unmistakable. This is General Patterson, Joint Chiefs. I wanted to personally congratulate you on the success of Operation Reckoning. Thank you, sir. We'll be in touch regarding your next assignment. This war isn't over, and we need officers like you on the front lines of the next phase. The line went dead. Kiera handed the phone back to Carter, her mind racing. Next assignment, next phase. It seemed her days of hiding in maintenance hangars were definitively over. Whether that was good news or bad news remained to be seen. The secure communication from Langley arrived at 3:47 hours, shattering the quiet confidence that had settled over Halaman Air Force Base following Operation Reckoning's apparent success. Agent Carter burst into the duty officer's quarters, where Kiera was attempting to catch a few hours of sleep before the inevitable round of follow-up meetings. "Get dressed," Carter said without preamble. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind where the man you supposedly killed 12 hours ago just posted a video message to his followers threatening to execute every American pilot involved in attacks against his organization." Kiera was pulling on her uniform before Carter finished speaking. "Where's the video?" "Conference room. Harrison's already there, along with half the intelligence community." The conference room hummed with urgent activity. Multiple screens displayed different angles of analysis. The video message itself, facial recognition comparisons, voice pattern analysis, and a growing list of personnel whose identities might have been compromised. In the center of it all, Malik Hassan al-Rashid's face stared out from a high-definition monitor, very much alive and clearly unimpressed by the previous day's missile strike. The video was uploaded to 17 different platforms simultaneously. A young analyst explained as Kiera entered. Professional-grade encryption, multiple proxy servers, and a distribution network that suggests significant technical sophistication. "When was it recorded?" Harrison asked. "Timestamp analysis indicates approximately 6 hours ago," the analyst replied. "Well after the compound was destroyed." General Morrison, who had apparently been summoned from Washington, stood near the main display with the grim expression of a man watching his carefully laid plans disintegrate. "Play it again," he ordered. Al-Rashid's voice filled the room, speaking in accented but precise English. "The American military believes they can hide their pilots behind classification levels and false identities. They believe that distance and technology make them invulnerable. Today, I prove them wrong." The camera pulled back to reveal al-Rashid standing in what appeared to be another compound, this one clearly different from the facility they had destroyed. Behind him, a large screen displayed photographs and personal information for dozens of military personnel. "Each face you see represents a pilot who has killed Muslim fighters," al-Rashid continued. "Each name represents a family that demands justice, and each location represents a target that will soon understand the price of American aggression." Kiera felt ice forming in her stomach as her own photograph appeared on the screen, along with details that should have been impossible for al-Rashid to obtain. Her real name,